What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Drew Coat Sports Talk. I am your host, Cody Johnson, where we talk about life, sports, and everything in between. It has been a chilly last few days here in our hometown of the Central Valley. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in and welcome to the show. So before we get started, please go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also go and follow us wherever you get your podcasts at to listen to us there. And follow us on social media. We're pretty active on there as well. But before I continue, I do want to give a special shout out. Thank you to Michael Davis, who runs Boom Broadcastings, for being my guest last week. It was a ton of fun. We had a ball chit-chatting before we went on, after we went on. Poor guy, he's 3 hours ahead of me as I'm in California, and he's over on the East Coast. And he was really gracious to give me his time, and I had a really good time talking with him. And, the whole network over there has been a fun group of guys. Lately, any chance I can, I've been popping over when they go live or when a new episode goes and watching it. And they have got a wealth of talent and shows that, whatever you're into. You got a wrestling show, a baseball show, you've got, I think it's like a celebrity type of one or entertainment news type one. Then you have Michael's, who's essentially like an all sports kind of one. So again, a huge shout out to Michael for coming on last week. If you guys are interested in checking out Boom Broadcasting, go and check it out. It is the last episode that aired on Drew Code before this one. So I highly recommend going and checking it out, giving it a listen, giving it a watch on YouTube, and not only subscribe to them, but subscribe to us. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I had a great time, and I can't wait until one of us is back on the respective shows to continue. So diving into this week's show, there's a lot that's happened in the sports world. Everything from the NBA, NFL, obviously Raider news, a lot of rumors going around right now about several different things regarding AP and his job security. The Raiders, of course, losing on Sunday, which we'll get into, basically improving their draft position to be in the top 5 or maybe even getting the number 1 pick to draft a quarterback, leading to a lot of speculation of Deion and Shedeur Sanders and all that kind of good stuff. And so we're going to talk about it, all of it. And then we're going to look ahead to week 12. And I'm going to try to incorporate a little bit of fantasy football for you guys, for those that are in fantasy football that need help in maybe gaining some ground on this bye week. There's 6 teams on a bye. So, there is a lot at stake, especially if you are in the hunt like I am. I'm in several different leagues, but one of the leagues I'm in right now with my cousins, I've been on a 4-game losing streak, and truthfully, it's just because of injuries and just trying to make it all work. And so I'm just in the thick of it, just like everybody else. So let's strap in. Let's get going. So, as I alluded to on Sunday, the Raiders played the Dolphins. Dolphins, obviously, as everyone knows, defeated the Raiders. Pretty convincing fashion. Tua with a late fourth quarter touchdown to Geno Smith kind of clinched the game. Gardner Minshew started for us. He threw a interception kind of in the fourth quarter that gave the Dolphins a extra possession, essentially, to extend the lead, which is what they did. The Dolphins did a really good job at staying on the field, wearing out the defense, having long drives. And, the defense just couldn't get off the field. I don't think we forced the Dolphins to punt at all that game. And for the Raiders offensively, this was the first game back from our bye week. And within that bye week, we obviously, as everyone knows, we had fired Luke Getsy, who was our offensive coordinator. We had promoted Scott Turner to be the interim OC, and then also hired former Oakland Raider head coach Norv Turner, his father, to be an offensive assistant coach, essentially helping him get used to coaching offense and implementing it and all that other stuff. So to add to the plethora of experienced head coaches on the Raiders staff, obviously AP has brought in Marvin Lewis. He has brought in Joe Philbin, now Norv Turner. I know there's another coach that I'm forgetting that was a former head coach that's on the Raiders now. He's kind of like an assistant coach in some way. It's essentially a lot of experience. And, you know, I'm okay with the move per se with Scott Turner being the OC. What I saw on Sunday didn't really, you know, blow me away, so to speak. I think, you know, our offense did look better. Yeah, marginally, I think. Our run game still couldn't really get going. So our offensive line is still the problem. Our, you know, passing attack was a little bit better. I think I've seen enough of Gardner Minshew, and I feel bad for Gardner Minshew. I don't think he's as bad as a quarterback as, you know, he has looked behind the Raiders center at this point. And I think a lot of that is because, you know, he had Luke Getsy, who was his OC. Now he has Scott Turner, and, you know, he's just doing the best with what he's got. And I'll be the first one to say that Raider Nation is very impatient when it comes to Gardner Minshew. And, you know, Gardner Minshew did throw, you know, 280 yards through 2 touchdowns. He did throw a pick, a costly pick. So, yeah, of course, you know, the Raiders and Raider Nation have high expectations. And I think, unfortunately, you know, we're seeing Gardner Minshew, who is not answering the bell respectively, and really helping our team win. And I'm not saying he's solely the one to blame for all the losses, but you know, there are some games that if turnovers weren't an issue, we would probably win some of these games. So I think, in my opinion, I think week 12 that we're going into, we're playing at home against the Denver Broncos. I think I'm in the camp that I would start Desmond Ridder at this point, at this point, because, you know, he's been on the team now for about 3 to 4 weeks. And at this point, you know, let's just throw him out there, see what we got. Maybe we can retain him as a backup role or whatnot, and see what the Raiders have. But I will also say too, though, you know, having the Raiders continue to roll out Gardner Minshew, AOC, Desmond Ridder, whoever the quarterback is, I think the one thing that, you know, we haven't really accepted as Raider fans quite yet, or some of us, maybe not everybody, but the fact that if we are looking for a franchise quarterback, we are going to have to just live with the results that are on the field with the team that's there. And not to say that we're accepting losing and being losers in any sense, but we need a franchise quarterback. I think I can speak for quite a bit of Raider fans. I'll speak for Drew, who's, you know, not on this episode, that we arguably are a quarterback away from being somewhat of a threat, because we'll have a quarterback and an offense that can keep us in games where we can rely on our defense. And now our defense has a little bit more energy to play with, because they're not just playing for pride, as what Max Crosby would say. They're actually playing to, you know, protect the lead. They're playing with a little bit of veracity, with some energy now, because there's more than just pride on the line now. We have actual expectations. And, you know, I think a quarterback that can help lead an offense that can get us in these situations where we can be competitive against tough teams like the Broncos have, you know, arguably a top 5, top 10 defense. And we don't really have an offense that's going to be able to compete with that, because not really a whole lot of weapons, definitely not a quarterback that can stand in there and, you know, take all that punishment that's going to come with standing in the pocket. You know, you got the Chargers, who as well have a pretty tough defense. Chiefs have a really good defense, and not only that, they can put points up in bunches, and the Raiders just really don't have anything right now that could combat that. And so it stands to reason that, you know, if we want the best quarterback prospect, you know, coming out of the draft, we may have to just be accepting of the results. And if that means we lose and it betters our chances to find a cornerstone player that's going to project us into prosperity for 10 years. It's got to be one of those seasons where we don't like losing, but it is what it is. These are the results. We are significantly injured on the defensive side of the ball. And, this season right now is just, it's a tough one. We already knew going in there that it was going to be a tough one with the quarterback situation. It didn't help with the Devontae Adams situation. And it is what it is, and I think what we're going to do is, as the Raiders are going to do, they're going to continue to look in the draft for young players that are going to make a difference. I trust Tom Telesco to do so. He has a really good eye for talent. At the LA Chargers right now, not only has he signed players like Khalil Mack and, a plethora of other ones, but he also helped draft, one of their left tackles that's there right now that's essentially fortified that offensive line. He did also draft Asante Samuels Jr., Joey Bosa, I believe, he had a hand in drafting. So, Tom Telesco is really good at finding talent, and I trust Tom Telesco. This is where the scouting and his level of football knowledge is going to come into play when it comes to drafting players. And there's probably no better person who I kind of trust at the moment to find somewhat of a franchise quarterback than Tom Telesco, because, Tom Telesco drafted Justin Herbert. And that's a big deal because it was for a while between Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa, and Tom Telesco decided to go with Justin Herbert. And as of right now, it looks like that was the best decision because, one, Justin Herbert, has he missed a few games because of injury? Yes, but definitely is not the reason why Chargers, before Jim Harbaugh, was losing games. It was, because of maybe the talent or the coaching around them. Now, Herbert has Harbaugh with him, and now he's now fitting into that top 5, placement that some people are putting Justin Herbert in, when really, like, the win-loss record didn't really justify it. And then you look at Tua, who, for all intents purposes, injury prone, kind of not sure how his future is going to be because of repetitive concussions. And on top of that, his responses to his own safety are kind of in question about, how he's going to make a tackle or whatnot. So that's kind of concerning. But again, these are all things that, kind of look good in Tom Telesco's favor, because he decided to go with Herbert over Tua. And it's kind of apparent now that, Justin Herbert is significantly better than Tua, or at least was the right pick than Tua. So I trust Tom to find also that right quarterback, whether that's, Shedeur Sanders or Cameron Ward, whether that's Jalen Milrose, regardless of the quarterback that we go after, and best believe we will be going after a quarterback in round 1. There's no doubt. Tom is definitely going to be looked at and trusted on that draft pick. So continuing on talking about the Raiders a little bit before I move on to some other sports news. I've been seeing, some reports on, like, Threads, on Blue Sky, on Instagram, that, Mike Vrabel is considered a strong head coach candidate for the Raiders. And if that were to happen, that would mean that Antonio Pierce would be out as a Raiders head coach. That would bring in Mike Vrabel. And some of this is centered around because Tom Brady is now, minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's reported that he will have a heavy influence on what the Raiders do in the offseason, their success, and how they run the team, which, let me go on the record and say, that sounds great to me. Not only does Tom Brady own us on the field, but now he legitimately owns us legally as well. And he's got to also tell us how to run our franchise. And now I say that in tongue in cheek, but in truth, that's probably the best that we can hope for is, an arguably the greatest player of all time in Tom Brady, the winningest player of all time, being someone that is going to take it upon himself to bring a franchise like the Raiders into the spotlight and into a realm of success that, quite frankly, we aren't used to. And I'm curious to see what that is. So as a Raiders fan, as somebody that's seeing all this, at this point, we're all upset that sometimes either when Al Davis was around, we didn't like his business decisions. Mark Davis, now we're all kind of, up in arms about certain decisions that Mark Davis makes. And now we have Tom Brady, who's kind of going to be leading the football operations side of the ownership, it sounds like. So that way Mark Davis could not maybe get a step aside and let a fresh voice kind of make football decisions from a football player. That actually sounds very interesting. Very curious to see how this all plays out now in the offseason. What concerns me is I'm not saying that Mike Vrabel isn't a good coach. In fact, I really liked Mike Vrabel last week's episode when I had Michael Davis of Boom Broadcasting. I did say that I thought Mike Vrabel would probably be the best head coach to lead the Dallas Cowboys because comments that Micah Parsons made about Mike McCarthy I thought were alarming. I don't think he makes those comments if a coach like Mike Vrabel, who demands respect from not only his players, but his coaching staff, and he's just a leader among men, and it's very apparent. In his time in Tennessee, very successful as a head coach, just kind of wasn't given an opportunity to continue to turn the ship around and was let go, even though he had a winning record, and Tennessee was pretty successful under Vrabel's tenure. So now, as Vrabel is over in Cleveland, which Cleveland is going through their situation right now, they will probably let go of Kevin Stefanski, which I don't think they should, which means Mike Vrabel is going to be on the hunt for a head coaching position. And there are going to be several teams looking for a head coach. Cowboys are on that list. I don't think the Raiders are going to be in the market for a head coach. We just hired AP. This is his first full season as a head coach. He has coached in 10 weeks, technically, because there's a bye week. And to just assume that after 11 weeks of AP is enough for us to assume that he's not the guy for the job is not a great sign for Raiders, the organization itself. In order for our, culture to set in order to get, your system in place, your whatever you're trying to teach your players, your coaching staff in your current regime, you're going to need more time than just 10 or 11 weeks. And I don't think it's fair for AP to be taken out to the pasture, so to speak, just because we're not, 10-0, or we're not 7-3, or a playoff contending team. Like that's not necessarily fair. We had an OC who we all can agree with wasn't a great hire, which it also wasn't AP's first choice. That was Cliff Kingsbury, who's in Washington doing really well right now. So AP's guy that he originally wanted, who is having a successful year at on a different team, could have been with us. That's not AP's fault. AP was told, he couldn't because of how much money that the OC position was asking for, or Kingsbury was asking for. And so the cheapest option, and unfortunately you get what you paid for, was Luke Getsy. And I think AP should be commended a little bit, though, to recognize that after 9 weeks and, several opportunities to turn it around, regardless of injury, it still didn't look right. And he made the decision that, okay, it's time to change the offense. And he's trusting in a younger OC whose father has had a footprint in the NFL for several years as being a former Raiders head coach, being a former Chargers head coach, offensive minded for sure. So we'll see how this all goes. But this is AP's first year to kind of figure out what AP's voice is. Like I was talking about this last week. For us to give up on people and not allow them to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and get better, it is really hard to expect any sort of success if you don't allow that individual, that team, that organization, whatever, that failure, and not learn from that failure. And it doesn't sound like that AP has lost the locker room. Does it sound like that everyone hates losing? Yes. Who likes losing? Nobody does. AP has made it very clear he hates losing. Max Crosby hates losing. But I don't hear any noise about the Raider players turning on AP. If anything, AP knows what they're going through. He is probably the best guy that's going to empathize and understand with what they're going through about going through a tough win-loss and persevering and working hard and not giving up when you need to continue to work hard. And to just let that go after 10 weeks, I think is just premature. And don't get me wrong, Mike Vrabel is a good coach. I think if this was like Josh McDaniels, and this was, let's say, his third year, and the Raiders are now 2 and whatever their record is now in Josh McDaniels' third season, and clearly, again, the offense isn't moving, the defense is terrible, then it would make sense. Yeah, okay, Josh McDaniels needs to go. Let's bring in Mike Vrabel to turn this around and get a completely different culture within the locker room. But I mean, who's to say that there's not a culture being built in the locker room right now with AP, just because the win-loss record doesn't reflect what we want it to. The Raiders don't have the players that they want. The one player that arguably was the marquee guy outside of Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, wanted out of town to go to New York, who is a dumpster fire compared to the Raiders. And we're going to get to that later on in the show. But, again, I like Mike Vrabel as a coach. I think he would be a great head coach, whatever his next stop is going to be. And it's going to be with a team that is looking for a head coach that's going to get him over the top, and it's going to be this offseason for sure. He's going to be a head coach again somewhere. I just don't agree with letting go of AP after this short amount of time. Now, is he on the hot seat? Unfortunately, yeah. Like if you're losing 6 games in a row, everyone's seat's got to get a little hot. But again, changes are being made. Starting quarterbacks are being changed. I wouldn't be surprised if he named Desmond Ridder the starting quarterback tomorrow, just to get things moving, like to change things up a bit. He's already said, what do we have to lose if we change something? It's not like we're in the playoff hunt right now. The real hunt that we're in right now is draft picks. And, I know that they are not fighting for a high draft pick, but unfortunately, the more that we lose, the better position we get. So we can win and be respectable and then get, in a top 15 pick and probably miss out on a first round draft pick, of a quarterback that we want, or, we just roll with what we have and then we rebuild in the offseason through the draft, which is what we've talked about. And we also get the quarterback that we want, which by all accounts, it sounds like it's probably going to be Shedeur Sanders if we are in the right position. So I'm going to move off of the AP situation. I do want to bring this up a little bit just to continue the conversation. This is according to ESPN.com. FPI has the Raiders with a 90% chance of getting a top 10 draft pick so far at this point. So we're in week 12. So there's 5 more weeks left of the season, or 6 more weeks left of the season. We have a 90% chance of getting a top 10 pick. We have a 56% chance of getting a top 5 pick. So we're currently holding the 5th pick right now if the season were to end and we kept the draft order as is. And we have a 14% chance of getting the number 1 overall draft pick. I think the 14% is really generous. I would say it's probably higher than that because we have some stiff teams that we got to play. We still have a game to play against the Broncos this Sunday. We got to play the Chargers at week 18. We still have to play the Chiefs. I believe that's on Christmas Day. We have a tough schedule coming up. So this percentage of getting the number 1 overall pick is probably going to increase for sure. So I'd be surprised if the Raiders won 4 games the whole season the way that we've been playing. So it is what it is. So, okay. So, continuing the conversation a little bit with head coaches, and I've seen this a little bit. Obviously, the Cowboys, they had a horrific loss to the Texans, their Texas rival. Jerry Jones, again, with additional comments, basically saying that they do everything right, which doesn't look like it. Micah Parsons on his podcast show, basically saying they're a damn good football team. I'm sure, those that are in the situation would believe that they are a good team. The record doesn't say it. Their effort and play on the field doesn't say it. They have Cooper Rush, who's now their starting quarterback at the moment because Dak is out for the year. I don't know why they're not putting in Trey Lance. Maybe that's more an indictment on Trey Lance. They are bad on defense, and Mike McCarthy is going to be fired at the end of the season. I still think that he will be let go before the season's over, just because I don't know if he still has the locker room. No one's happy. Jerry isn't happy. Just let Mike go, because I'm sure he's a dead man walking. So it's kind of, what are we doing? And I've been seeing that ESPN has been making this, this point, or what their prediction is that, Deion Sanders would be the one that would go to Dallas and the Cowboys to basically fix the Cowboys. And what they would have to do is he would have to bring his son Shedeur, or Cowboys, would draft Shedeur. Here's what I think about it. That's probably is going to happen. I think the Cowboys are in the market to draft a quarterback. Dak Prescott had a season-ending surgery on his hamstring. Kind of on the older side in terms of quarterback. I think he's in his 30s now. He did re-sign for a 4-year contract. So he's on the books for at least 3 more seasons, not including this one. That's for sure. Of course, we're looking ahead. Is this team really going to be competitive in the next 4 years? I don't know. We'll see what they do in the offseason. If they continue what they did in the offseason, probably not. With whatever first round pick they have, and I think that they're in contention right now to either be a top 12 or a top 10 pick. They might go after that Boise State running back. I believe his name is Alshon Jeffrey, I believe. They might go after him, which would be a Cowboys thing to do. They are known to get huge star running backs in the draft. They need to rebuild that offensive line. I think that they should draft a quarterback. Will they do it in the first round? I don't know. But if they were to get a coach like Deion, it will take them drafting Shedeur Sanders to convince Deion to go. And now there's a little bit of whispers. I've heard conflicting stuff, though. I've heard interviews from Deion saying that, he doesn't want to coach because what he does in college is, more fulfilling than what he'll do in the NFL, because he doesn't want to coach grown men on how to do grown man things. That's why he's kind of doing the college route, because he's teaching boys how to become men. And, and then I've seen, some other FS1 reporters that have said, he's really happy with Colorado. He probably is not even going to take another opportunity at any other school. He really loves where he's at with Colorado. Then I've heard rumors of Florida State, the Jaguars being a team, the Raiders being a team that he would go and coach for. And I think what I would believe in is, I don't think Deion is leaving Colorado. I do believe when Deion says, I'm happy where I'm at, I'm content, and he's going to stay put. I don't know if Deion has the kind of power organizationally in the NFL to do what he's doing in Colorado. In Colorado, he is changing the program from the ground up. And I don't know if Deion would have that freedom in a NFL, team. Now, again, primetime Deion Sanders is no stranger to how the NFL works, how NFL teams operate. He was with the Cowboys, with the Niners, with the Falcons. So he has seen his fair share of how teams run or operate and whatnot. So he would know far better than me, obviously. But at least from what I understand, in college, especially Jim Harbaugh, when he was in Michigan, a lot of things were different because Jim Harbaugh had a lot of influence on what was allowed, what he would want to do, what he wanted to change, and this and that and the third. And I think Deion's doing the same thing in Colorado, which is why Colorado went from 4 wins or whatever their win total was last year to now having an 8-2 record and being, in the top 25 rankings right now in the NCAA. So I think, could Deion make an impact in the NFL? Yeah, but does he want to? I don't know. I kind of believe when he says that he's going to stay put. Now, we'll see after the end of the season for both college and the NFL, especially when the combine comes up. I don't think Shedeur's throwing in the combine. He'll probably throw at his pro day. He'll probably be throwing to Travis Hunter, of course, because they'll both be probably a top 5 draft pick, both of them. So we'll see. I don't know, though, if Deion is going to be the coach that kind of saves the Cowboys. I know like Ben Johnson, who's a name that's been floating around there right now in the NFL circles as a potential head coach, and he will probably be a head coach next season, and Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator, respectively, of the Detroit Lions. Those two coordinators will probably both be in a new situation where they're leading programs or leading teams on their own. Ben Johnson is probably the most notable one right now, where he is the latest hot name that is flying off the presses. Michael last week mentioned that he wanted him on the Dallas Cowboys. With how Jerry Jones is, I don't know if they're going to get really a good coach to deal with Jerry. I don't know if Deion wants to deal with Jerry, is another reason why I'm not sure if Deion Sanders going to the Cowboys will work. And I don't really know what other team immediately would fit, with whatever Deion is looking for. So I'm not sure. I will say, though, too, there are some fans, like 49er fans I've also seen, and I saw a clip on TikTok, where there's questions on if Kyle Shanahan should get fired because of how he's coached this team or how they're underperforming or whatever the case may be. And I'll say this right now. If Kyle Shanahan is ever on the market, that is probably one of very few head coaches where I would be hoping that the Raiders go after, like a full-on blitz. We'll pay you whatever you want to come and coach this franchise, and also be okay with, like, I'm sorry, AP, I know we signed you on, but, see ya. Kyle Shanahan's available, because Kyle Shanahan has made the 49ers relevant for, it seems like, nearly 10 seasons now. And yes, Kyle Shanahan helped the Atlanta Falcons go to the Super Bowl. Does he have a problem holding leads in the fourth quarter? Maybe. However, the Niners are always a team that is always feared. Even now, the 49ers are under 500, and yet they feel like a team that is are on the cusp of getting on a run to get into the playoffs. And if they get into the playoffs, they're a team that could potentially go deep into the playoffs and challenge whoever in the NFC, just because that's how well coached they are offensively. And their defense is very, very well coached as well. So for 49er fans that are kind of crying that they're having a lackluster season due to injury and a bunch of other things, and are saying we should let go of Kyle Shanahan, please do that. So that way my Raiders have an opportunity maybe to get a coach that could change our franchise as well. And again, that's what Kyle Shanahan is to the NFL. Like, he is somebody that people will line up for. They will let go of their current coaches to go after to change their franchise, because Kyle Shanahan makes a difference. That's what I would say. That's what I would say about that situation. So one of the questions I did pose, though, in my notes to myself here about this episode is, kind of wanted to go through, and I think I know this answer, but I want to throw it out there. Who has had the worst season so far? The New York Jets or the Las Vegas Raiders? And a quick recap, the Las Vegas Raiders are 2-7. They have, 2-8. No, they're 2-7. Excuse me. I'm getting their records mixed up here. Obviously, they traded Devontae Adams to the New York Jets. They made a quarterback change week 4, had to go back to Gardner Minshew due to injury to AOC. Suffered several different key injuries to the defensive side of the ball. Fired our OC, and now we're in a position to get at least a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick, and we have a really good shot at getting the number 1 overall pick. The New York Jets, though, have Aaron Rodgers, who's coming back from an Achilles, who is playing a shell of himself, to be completely blunt. They did acquire Devontae Adams, who is significantly underperforming. And I also shared this on our TikTok page, that there's a report now that he is now frustrated with his new team, and his relationship with his quarterback is withering. And, losing will do that. But at the same time, let's have this be a lesson to everybody that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Just because, you want to go play with your friend on the Titanic doesn't mean you should go. And the Jets throughout the season have fired their head coach, demoted their offensive coordinator, who is now just, I don't know what he does now. I don't think he's fired, though. Their defense has gone from being a feared top 5 defense to probably the worst defense in the NFL. And they just recently fired their general manager, who found their most recent, young core of players. I think his name is Joe Douglas. He's the one that drafted Sauce Gardner. He's the one that drafted Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. I think he drafted 7 valued players, I think is what the number was. And the Jets fired him as if he's the problem. And here they are in a world of just a dumpster fire, a tire fire, as Drew would say. I can't even put into words how astonishingly bad the Jets season has been. Losing fourth quarter leads to the Colts, to the Patriots, who arguably, if the Jets were a contender as they believed, they should have won those games. They should be far more competitive. But, you got Aaron Rodgers, who just is not Aaron Rodgers as he was before. And then you just have a defense that can't stop a nosebleed. You have no leadership structure in that team. It is very reminiscent of the Brooklyn Nets when they had the big three of James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and they had Steve Nash as their head coach, but I think they dismissed him at some point. And, and I think I made this point a couple of episodes ago, where basically Kyrie Irving made the remark that they didn't need a coach to play because that's how talented he believed that they were. And I believe that's the same kind of arrogance that Aaron Rodgers has had this whole season. And I hope this is a eye-opening experience for those that, have players on their team that don't take coaching and think it's important, because this season is the epitome of why having structure, a leader in the locker room that's a head coach that has his pulse on the team, is so important, and not just a player, not just, granted, like, is Aaron Rodgers going to be in the Hall of Fame? Probably. I mean, he's regarded as one of the most talented throwers of the football, which is great. Leadership qualities, not there. And that's fine. He'll still probably, be regarded as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in history. But yet, this season, you can say it's his fault. You can say it's ownership's fault, whatever. But it's almost deteriorated the more that Aaron Rodgers has been in town, from my perspective. So let me know who's had the worst season, the Raiders or the Jets. My money's on the Jets, because I think that the Raiders still have a good head coach, still have a good GM. It's one bad season for us, but we still have our draft picks. We have cap space. There's opportunity for us to improve and get better. We're having a bad season. We're throwing a fit because we were competitive last year. We want to be competitive, and we're just not quite there yet. The Jets have diminished each season, and they have let go of draft pick after draft pick to where they have little to no assets to rebuild, and they still have a 40-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, who they will probably let go, and that's fine. He will be on someone's team because it's Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think Aaron Rodgers is retiring, and I do not want the Raiders to sign him. If Devontae Adams was still on the Raiders and this was all still happening and there was an opportunity to get Aaron Rodgers for one rental season, yeah, that would make more sense. No. Now I don't want Aaron Rodgers. There's no need to have Aaron Rodgers. There's no point now. So it is what it is, and that's what I think is that's who I think is having the worst season out of the Jets and the Raiders. So, okay, I'm going to take a quick break for our partners, as we are powered by StreamYard, and of course with SeatGeek, who is our partner as well. We'll play a couple of those ads, and then I will be right back. Drew Coat Sports Talk is powered by StreamYard. Want to take your podcast to the next level? Use StreamYard. It's the easiest way to record, stream, or produce high-quality episodes, whether you're solo or with guests. Plus, when you sign up today, you'll get a $10 credit to get started. Use the link in our bio. Don't miss out. StreamYard is your key to seamless podcasting. Drew Code Sports Talk is supported by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is your go-to app for tickets, making it super easy to find the best deals. They even rate each ticket deal on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting your money's worth. And as a special thank you to our listeners, we've got a promo code just for you. Use Drew Code at checkout to get $20 off your first order. That's $20 off your first purchase, whether it's for the game that you've been dying to see or that concert that everybody is talking about. Head over to SeatGeek now, find your perfect seat, and use Drew Code for $20 off your first order. SeatGeek. Get your tickets to the action today. All right, welcome back to Drew Code, guys. Thank you guys so much for sticking around. Again, if you guys are looking to get a great deal on any tickets to any concert, any sporting event that you guys want to go to, use Drew Code to get $20 off your first order using SeatGeek. And also, Drew Code Sports Talk is powered by StreamYard. The link in our bio, if you click on that, you guys can get a $10 credit when you guys get started. StreamYard is used for our YouTube content, for our audio podcasting content. So highly recommend it. Link is down below if you guys are interested. And also we're partners with Fanatics, which I don't have a video for that one quite yet, but go to the link in our episode card and you guys can purchase your favorite sports teams, official licensed gear from from whatever athlete, team, or league that you guys are interested in. So appreciate you guys for sticking around. So I'm going to quickly go over a couple of week 11 recaps and then kind of circle into week 12 because, it's a bye week for 6 teams and a majority of those teams are playoff teams. We have a playoff picture kind of forming right now and it's looking pretty interesting. So I'm going to try to touch on that a little bit before the end of the show and kind of go from there. So, as I was talking earlier, the 49ers are kind of in turmoil right now. They've underperformed, to say the least. Super Bowl aspirations started off this year, with having CMC on the IR because of a calf or potential Achilles injury. Earlier this season, they had Brandon Ayuk hold out, and now he's out with an injury right as he was kind of ramping up and getting into playing shape. Deebo Samuel, who I have in my fantasy team, has underperformed by his standards, I would say. Defensively, the Niners have let go of a lot of leads in the fourth quarter. Funny enough, to their divisional rivals, they've lost to the Cardinals, they have lost to the Rams, and now they have lost to the Seahawks, and the Seahawks have now gotten themselves back up to where they are now, I believe, looking to get the top spot in the NFC West. Which I'll talk about in week 12. But the Niners, their window of opportunity is closing. As one of my bold predictions I said earlier this year, I said that I didn't think that they were going to be a threat to get into the Super Bowl. And I even made the bold prediction that I believe that due to injury and also the Super Bowl hangover, that I didn't think that they'd get into the playoffs. So far, I'm not trying to say I'm right yet, knock on wood, but, it's looking like that this team is not in the position to be contenders as they have been. It might be one of those years where they've got to regroup and come back next year when they're healthy, and then they'll probably take the league by storm. And then Thursday Night Football this past week was the Eagles defeating the Commanders. I posted this on our TikTok page about the Eagles are a NFC team that I think people aren't forgetting about, but aren't putting in the upper echelon, like with the Lions. The Lions have had 2 impressive victories against Tennessee Titans and against who was the team that they just ramshot all over. It was the Titans and it was the Jaguars. AFC South teams, watch out. But anyways, the Lions, of course, have been putting up points in bunch. They just obviously went toe-to-toe with the Texans the week prior to that, where they came back from a deficit and their defense basically shut out the Texans for them to win. And, the Lions are in a position now where, of course, they hold the number 1 seed in the NFC, but the Eagles are, in the second seed, and they are gaining just as much momentum, it feels like, and they have experience behind them, just like the Lions do. So I think this is a very interesting situation that's coming up where the Eagles are starting to kind of form that continuity that you need, get hot right at the moment that you need. They've got some games coming up where they got to go against the Cowboys, against the Giants one more time. The Commanders are able to see one more time. So we'll see if the Eagles are going to continue to win and better their position, or at least continue this stronghold. But the Eagles are a team to kind of consider in the NFC as another team that could represent in the Super Bowl, just because the amount of players that they have on the offensive side and their depth on that defense, which once they start playing well and playing hard, they could get back into the Super Bowl like they were just a few seasons ago. I've talked about this already. Jets blew another fourth quarter lead to the Colts. It's probably safe to say that the Jets season is over. I don't know how they're going to get into the playoffs mathematically. Technically, they are still in the running, but technically, a bottle of Jack Daniels could fall from the sky and hit me in the head, but probably the likelihood of that happening is very low. So I would say the same thing for the Jets' playoff chances. However, I do want to highlight that Anthony Richardson played extremely well in his first game back since getting benched. And I think this is a great thing for Anthony Richardson because, he came out with some quotes that said that he understood the magnitude and the importance behind his position, and he kind of got a better sense of it, which two things. One, I'm surprised he didn't have a sense of it to begin with. Two, I'm glad that he finally found that sense that he was talking about, because now I think the Colts could have a quarterback that is going to make them very successful. I think if Anthony Richardson had been playing this well from the start of the season, the Colts would probably be a playoff threat right now, but probably not in the cards for them in terms of playoffs, but something that they can build off of, and a huge confidence booster to Anthony Richardson. Now, he's got a tough matchup. Let me see who he has going. The Colts will be going up against the Lions. Ooh, that's a tough matchup. And it is in Indianapolis, though, so it's a home game. But this will be a real good test for Anthony Richardson to see how much sense, so to speak, that he has gained from being benched to where can he play well. The Colts offensive line is pretty good, so let's see if Anthony Richardson can just play his game, not get into situations where he gets sacks, protects the ball. That Colts defense too is a little underrated, so let's see how they do against the Lions. However, most defenses don't do well against the Lions, so something to look out for. And then the Bills handed the Chiefs their first loss of the season, so the Bills by all intents purposes look like the biggest threat in the AFC. That's also because the Ravens lost to the Steelers, and the Steelers are now the AFC North leaders right now at the moment. And Bills right now look like they're the hottest team in the NFL. Offensively, even though they don't have Amari Cooper fully incorporated, they are running the ball very effectively. The offensive line is blocking well. Josh Allen looks like a solidified MVP candidate, if not the front runner for it, even though Lamar Jackson has had an MVP-like season. So it's very interesting to see how the rest of the NFL regular season will go, to see who's going to get the NFL MVP. If I had to put my money on it, I would probably say Josh Allen, just because the NFL is really into storylines. And the Bills, who arguably should have been a team that regressed because they don't have Stephon Diggs, has actually kind of come together in a way. And a lot of that is on the back of Josh Allen, who has done a really good job at protecting the football, not turning it over hardly at all, which has been something that he has done religiously or regularly throughout his career. This season, not so much. And he's now gotten the Bills to be a legit Super Bowl threat. Like, it would not be surprising if the Bills get to the Super Bowl. So I think that's a huge reason why Josh Allen is probably the front runner in the NFL MVP conversation, even though you still have quarterbacks like Jared Goff, who are probably in there, Lamar Jackson, as I had mentioned, fill in whoever else you want to say that, also might be doing it. But, for sure, Josh Allen is at the top of that. So good on the Bills. Let's see if they can continue I don't think that they are, maybe before I say that, no, they're not playing this week. So the Bills are on a bye this week. So huge win going into their bye for sure against the Chiefs. And the Chiefs are going to have to rebound, but their rebound game is against the Panthers and Carolina. So we'll see how they do. I'm pretty certain that they'll rebound just fine. Bengals lose to a shootout to the Chargers on Sunday Night Football. This was actually a really good game. I feel bad for Joe Burrow. He's the leader in the passing in statistical yardage right now in the NFL. Jamar Chase is the all intents purposes Triple Crown winner right now for wide receivers in the NFL right now. And yet they are probably going to have a top 15, maybe even a top 10 draft pick, come draft season because of their record. And Zach Taylor is one of those coaches that is probably not going to be back with the Bengals. I don't think they'll let him go at this season, but again, another head coaching spot that might be open. And this is a team that I think would be very intriguing to Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson has a quarterback in Joe Burrow who is really, really good quarterback, very, very good thrower of the football. They need to work out the contract situation with Jamar Chase. If this doesn't prove that Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in the NFL, I don't know what's going to do it, but the Bengals need to pay Jamar Chase. Bengals will probably let T. Higgins walk, and they'll probably just draft a young receiver in his place. And there is a lot of talent at receiver, but I think Ben Johnson getting into this team, you still have Chase Brown, you still have Zach Moss, and probably will get into in the draft, probably get another running back to solidify, get younger at that position. And the defense, got to see what they're going to do with the defense as well. So Ben Johnson going to the Bengals would be an interesting head coaching hire for them. Not the flashiest thing, but, Ben Johnson would have, a top 4 type of quarterback. If the Bengals can bring back Jamar Chase, he already has an elite wide receiving weapon. And there are some pieces there, some assets there that, they can very easily use to turn around the team. So we'll see. I think that's an interesting team that could be on the horizon for Ben Johnson, if not the Dallas Cowboys being an option as well. And as I already mentioned, the Steelers had defeated the Ravens, and the Steelers at this moment right now are the top AFC North team who, took the lead against the Ravens, who for a long time, and I even mentioned this too, that the Ravens were probably one of those AFC threats that could dethrone the Chiefs, even though they lost in week 1. But you had Derrick Henry, a very good offensive line, Lamar Jackson throwing the ball very effectively, almost more effectively this season than he did in his MVP campaign last year. And yet the Steelers with, Russell Wilson, who since that move to put Russell Wilson in the starting quarterback line spot, Mike Tomlin is probably higher up there right now for coach of the year, because that took a lot of guts, a lot of trust. And since then, the offense looks more explosive. The run game is even doing better. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren typically are not the most flashiest of running backs, but now they both are running with energy, with power. George Pickens, even though he has some immature moments, he's a very explosive receiver that seems to get a lot of receptions. You have Russell Wilson, former Super Bowl quarterback, that is leading that team and that offense led by Arthur Smith, their OC. Got to give it up to Mike Tomlin for putting them in the position that they're at, to where, I wouldn't say that they're a massive AFC threat, but with that defense, they can play with just about anybody. That defense with TJ Watt getting after you, they can get to anybody. That secondary, when there's that pressure coming after your quarterback, that secondary is really good about tracking the ball and putting pressure on your receivers. The Steelers are a team that they're not the sexiest team, they're not the flashiest team, but they're the team that will get you because they're coached like crazy, like you wouldn't believe. And what's interesting is Mike Tomlin is one of the longer tenure coaches in the league. And I think that goes to show that teams that change coaches repetitively every few seasons should take notes that sometimes, even though you have a season where by your standards it's not the best, because Mike Tomlin still does not have a season with a losing record, but he there has been years where he just made it at 500 or a game above 500, or they just missed out on the playoffs, or they got into the playoffs and the wild card in some form or fashion. Like Mike Tomlin, who has been with the Steelers, has put in a culture there and has gotten this team to play probably better than a lot of people expected. And I think this is the year where Mike Tomlin gets coach of the year. And I think this is a lesson, as I mentioned, for the rest of the league, that sometimes you got to just continue to let your coach the team. He hasn't lost the locker room. They're making progress. You got to trust that that culture is being set and that good things will happen. Dan Campbell, as another example, with how great the Detroit Lions are at the moment. I can remember his press conference about biting kneecaps, and we were all making fun of it. And there's clips of him being extremely emotional about how badly he wants his team to succeed. And now look at him. The Lions, a team that is, on the cusp of being a Super Bowl team, at least getting into the playoffs for sure, deep into the playoffs, yes, and arguably the favorites to be in the Super Bowl representing the NFC. And I think the Steelers, they may not have the same style that the Lions do, but the Steelers have a good coach that knows what he's doing. And I think that's what's a huge difference. And I think he's front runner for coach of the year, especially with what he did to change, going with Russell Wilson over Justin Fields, even though some people probably wouldn't have agreed with that. I was one of them, I'll completely admit. But that was a quick recap of week 11. So we're moving on to week 12 now. We have the Steelers and the Browns for Thursday Night Football. Some fantasy implications here. If you guys do not have, a starting receiver, I would look at Elijah Moore in this situation. If you got a Jerry Jeudy who's available in your waiver wire, I'd look to pick them up. This is at home in Cleveland. Even though the Cleveland Browns have a 2-8 record right now, clearly they are going to be a team that's in a rebuild mode. I would look at them because Jameis Winston has had some pretty good offensive games. And one of the games specifically was against the Ravens. I'm forgetting what team that they just played this past Sunday, where Jameis Winston threw for a bunch of yards. Elijah Moore was a benefit of that, and Jerry Jeudy, was that. So, fantasy-wise, if you're looking for some fill-in receivers, Elijah Moore would probably be on my high list right now. I would see him as somebody that you can probably put in your flex spot if you need. Jerry Jeudy, I think, is getting a lot of this trust right now from Jameis Winston, where if you need a wide receiver too, maybe that's another person to plug in. Steelers right now, I would say, in terms of getting a quarterback, I would totally start Russell Wilson right now. I have a league with my cousins, and one of them, the one where I'm needing to fight for a playoff spot, I have made the decision that I'm starting now Russell Wilson in my second QB spot this week. One, because of a bye week, but the matchup is also much better in this one as well with the Browns. Browns don't really have that great of a defense, and I think Russell Wilson and his connection with George Pickens is a really, really good one. And I think, if you're looking for a quarterback to get you by, I think Russell Wilson is a QB that you should put in your starting lineup this Thursday night, when he goes against the Browns. Excuse me. And also, too, I've got the Steelers taking that victory. So, and then continuing to look ahead right now, a huge NFC North matchup right now with the Vikings and the Bears. I think the Vikings are going to take this one. Again, for receivers that you're looking for, Jordan Addison is a really good fill-in right now. For the Bears, I think this would be a good time to look at if you have Keenan Allen or Adunze in the waiver wire right now. I think Adunze would probably be a pretty good fill-in right now because I think there's a connection happening with Caleb Williams, and I think that would be a really good plug-in spot for, if you have a flex or a wide receiver too, very similar to the Browns one. Also, Cole Kmet. I can see Cole Kmet getting a lot of targets in this game with the Bears in Chicago against the Vikings. It's a divisional matchup, so a couple of fantasy options there, but I would have the Vikings. Moving on to some further implications here, not trying to put salt in the wound, but I do see the Cowboys and Commanders. This is in Washington. Look, I got the Commanders on this one. Dan Quinn is coming back or is playing against his former team, the Cowboys, and he has the book on probably how to play everyone. So this could get ugly. I think Marshawn Lattimore is also going to start in this game. So I've got the Commanders in this one. In terms of fantasy, look, if you have CeeDee Lamb, start him. Clearly, he is the number one guy for Cooper Rush. I don't know if Cooper Rush is a startable quarterback in my opinion, though, just because I can see that this defense for the Commanders may shut Cooper Rush out. But, for sure, CeeDee Lamb is a must start regardless. I don't see how you can sit him. For the Commanders, though, look, Zach Ertz is a really good play right now at tight end if you need somebody there. Jaden Daniels, he has a really good connection with Terry McLaurin. Noah Brown is one. He's the one that caught the Hail Mary touchdown to beat the Bears, so that's also another one. But those are a couple of fantasy options. But for this game particularly, I have the Commanders defeating the Cowboys. Broncos and Raiders, I'm just going to quickly say I think the Broncos have this one. If you are looking for a starting quarterback, probably for the rest of the season, if you've got like a weaker quarterback, let's say you have a Kirk Cousins, or I would even say those that are in the camp of having a CJ Stroud. I have a CJ Stroud in a couple of leagues. I would say you should probably look at starting Bo Nix in this game and maybe look at Bo Nix for the rest of the season, just because points-wise, Bo Nix has outscored CJ Stroud the last 5 weeks. So for quarterbacks, you might want to look at getting a Bo Nix to start for your fantasy lineup, and you will probably see that jump. Like CJ Stroud is averaging between 14 to 16 points. Bo Nix is a solid 19, maybe even 20 plus against the Raiders. Not a very good defense. This is in Las Vegas, so it is in a dome. I can see Bo Nix being a little bit more aggressive in terms of throwing the football, and Courtland Sutton is getting going. Little Jordan Humphreys, he's getting going. So I'd see Bo Nix as being a quarterback that you should probably look at starting for the rest of your fantasy season to possibly get over the hump and get in the playoffs if you're fighting for one. For the Raiders, I think a really good pick to get if you're looking to start somebody would probably be Jacoby Myers. He's probably really the only fantasy option I would say at receiver that you should look at. I don't think Brock Bowers is available in any leagues, because if you're smart, you'd have picked him up by now. Amir Abdul is probably going to be the starting running back. I wouldn't trust Amir Abdul, not because he's not a good running back. I don't see that there is a lot of opportunity for him to get a lot of rush yards. Will he get a lot of receptions? Sure. But it also depends on Alex Madison's health status. And even if Madison is healthy, the Broncos have a very ferocious front, which I don't think there's any run game that's getting through that. So I would say for the Raiders, it's going to be a very interesting offensive game for them. And Jacoby Myers is probably the only receiver, maybe Trey Tucker. Those are really the only two I would say if you're really, really desperate in deeper leagues, maybe those two you're looking at. But I would have the Broncos against the Raiders in this one. That would improve the Raiders' chances of getting the number one overall pick. So moving on. Huge NFC matchup right now with the Niners versus the Packers. This one is in Green Bay. It looks like it's going to be a cold one in Wisconsin on this game. I would say I would have the Green Bay Packers taking this one. I really like that defense, and I think the 49ers are just playing out of sync. I mean, they're going to be a very good offensive team. I don't think Brock Purdy is a washed quarterback that's going to lose them the game. If anything, I think the Green Bay Packers are just a better team. They're healthier at the moment, so I can see this game, going to the Packers. I have been saying that I think Romeo Doubs is a legit fantasy receiver that you can start in your flex. He only had 2 targets last week. I don't know if that's offensive scheme plan. I'm going to just trust and say I think Romeo Doubs is a player that if you picked up and you put in your flex, he's going to have opportunities. Now, Christian Watson, if that's available, that's another good one because he's a big play threat. But I feel like that Romeo Doubs and Jordan Love, when they are on the same page, there's a lot more that comes out of that. And because I love Romeo Doubs route running a little bit more. So I would say, if you're looking for a receiver out of this one and you don't have Jawan Jennings, which, Jawan Jennings is probably the number one target right now. He's definitely getting all the target shares and he's getting all the yards. If you don't have Jawan Jennings in this game, Romeo Doubs is a good one. Christian Watson is a questionable one. Those are probably the 2 receivers that I would probably look at if you're looking to get a flex or a fill-in for that game. But I got the Packers in this one. We got the Cardinals and Seattle. So this one is for essentially to get the lead for the NFC West crown right now. The Cardinals and you got Seahawks. Cardinals, look, I think if you don't have Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm not sure. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know who the second receiver is for the Cardinals, so I don't know if that's a good play or not. I think obviously if you have McBride, you start him. Obviously start Harrison. I think Harrison and Kyler Murray's, trust level is going up. For the Seahawks, look, obviously there's DK Metcalf who's going to basically be getting a ton of coverage on him. I would say Jackson Smith is a good receiver too. If you haven't picked him up, to go grab him, to put him in there. Also Tyler Lockett, if he's sitting on the waiver, this might be a game where he gets some, because I don't think that this Cardinals secondary is that good. So that there's some, fantasy implications on that one as well. This one is in Seattle, and I have Seattle to take the victory and to tie for the NFC West. And to carry on, I've got the Eagles and the Rams. I actually think that the Eagles are on upset alert in this game because you got Puka Nacua back for the Rams. Matthew Stafford, if you need a quarterback as well, I think is a good option. He threw for 4 touchdowns last week. Now that he has both Puka and Cooper Kupp back, this offense does look like a little bit more of what we saw earlier this year when they were moving the ball very effectively. I think Matthew Stafford at home plays really well. The Eagles secondary, though, is a bit scary, so be patient. I can see some turnovers happening for Matthew Stafford, but I think he's a value start if you need a quarterback, especially if you got like Josh Allen on a bye week right now. This is a really good fill-in along with Bo Nix if Stafford isn't available in your league as well. I would say for the Eagles, look, if you have anyone for the Eagles or anyone for the Rams, clearly you're starting them because you don't have enough players on your bench probably. So everyone's an all-start on this game. I don't really have any sleepers to give you. Maybe DeMarcus Robinson is like a sleeper one, or Tutu Atwell. But for the most part, all the main names, Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, as I mentioned, Puka Nacua, those are all starts. For Philadelphia, Dallas Goedert's a start. A.J. Brown's a start. Devonta Smith is a start. So all the Eagles and all the Rams players are a start. I don't really have any deep ones for the Eagles outside of maybe Juwan Dotson, excuse me, I believe is the only other Eagles receiver maybe that you can throw a flyer out there, or Kenneth Gainwell. But other than that, really not a whole lot. And then the last one is the Ravens and the Chargers. So here's what I love about this game. So the Ravens have obviously, Zay Flowers, who a lot of people are going to have, obviously Derrick Henry, who a lot of people are going to have. Obviously everyone's going to have Lamar Jackson, but Justin Hill, this is another one where you might want to think about picking him up if you need a filler. Rashad Bateman, this is one where he's probably going to come available. Deontay Johnson is one that the Ravens did acquire. Obviously, that was, I think, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So Deontay Johnson is going to take some time to get acclimated with the offense. And I can see in this game, Monday Night Football, maybe he's getting a little bit more field time, a little bit more routes, and maybe Lamar Jackson, starts looking at him because the Chargers have a pretty good secondary, but there's so many weapons that are needed to account for on the Ravens. Deontay Johnson could be a player that is not accounted for. And again, super deep leagues, if you're looking for somebody, flyer on Rashad Bateman or Deontay Johnson is something to really consider. For the Chargers, I think it's pronounced Layden McConkle. That is a wide receiver that you should be putting on your roster. I've already picked him up in a couple of leagues right now. He is becoming Justin Herbert's favorite target. He's basically, another version of Keenan Allen, who has a really good route tree that is very impressive. McConkey is becoming almost the number one receiver in this offense. And then Quentin Johnson is another one I think should be considered on adding, because Johnson has been used a little bit more on the deeper routes and is starting to see more targets and actually kind of being a big play threat like what he was drafted for last year. So I think McConkey and Quentin Johnson are 2 players for the Chargers receiver-wise that to be looked at. For running backs, of course, J.K. Dobbins is the number one guy. They really don't have a backup one, and there's not a backup one that I would recommend. So I would just go with McConkey and Quentin Johnson for players to look for in fantasy. For the Eagles, like I had mentioned, I think that the Eagles are on upset alert, but I would still side with the Eagles to win in SoFi Stadium against the Rams. And for Monday Night Football, I'm actually going to go with the Ravens. This is the Harbaugh brothers game, and I think the Ravens are going to have a lot to prove, obviously with Derrick Henry, with Lamar Jackson. I think that's just too much for this Chargers defense, and I can see the Ravens at SoFi Stadium winning on the road and upsetting the Chargers. Now, I wouldn't be surprised, though, if the Chargers did come out with a victory. They're a very well-coached football team, good defense, good offense as well, but I just think the Ravens have a chip on their shoulder. They have more to prove, and honestly, they're going to need to come out with this win if they want to stay in contention in the AFC, because if they lose this game and fall to 7-5 and the Chargers leapfrog to 8-3, that is going to be huge playoff implications going forward, because now will the Ravens get like a lower seed in the wild card to where they have a tough matchup. So a lot of fantasy implications on that one. And before I close the show, I did want to bring up a couple of things that I had seen in the NBA, because I haven't really talked NBA too much this season. One of them specifically is the story about the player meeting that happened with the 76ers, where Tyrese Maxey basically called out Joel Embiid during this team meeting and said that he needs to stop being late for team meetings, and amongst other things. But in the gist of it, Joel Embiid is basically not showing great leadership, and because of his lack of respect for team meetings and being on time and effort, it's a negative against the team, and it's reflective of that, and it's poor leadership. And Tyrese Maxey having to call out Joel Embiid, who, by the way, Tyrese Maxey is one of the younger players on the team, showing that kind of leadership. One is super commendable, but two is a huge indictment on Joel Embiid. I've already had apprehensions about Joel Embiid in terms of like him as a basketball player in the NBA. I think he's a good player, but his play is diminished over the last few seasons. Joel Embiid has never been a center that I've seen where he uses his size and his strength to back down. He's someone that likes to shoot the fadeaway midway or shoot the three-pointer. And, when Joel Embiid is, in shape and he's ready to go, he's a very good player. He's demonstrated that, a lot throughout the seasons in his career. Now, I will say he's been hindered by injuries and whatnots throughout his career. So, sure, his health is in question, and sometimes he can't play every single game. He did make some questionable remarks where he said he wasn't playing back-to-backs anymore, which is basically about 20% of the games he's going to end up playing. And on top of that, he wasn't going to play in his rest games, so he would already be under the threshold for winning awards, which he already said he wasn't interested in, and amongst other things. But I think what's upsetting is seeing Joel Embiid, who's a former MVP, who's all intents and purposes an all-NBA type of player, who Philadelphia has the nomer of trust the process, where literally they tanked to get him, babied him, and he kind of is spitting in the face of Philadelphia fans. I'm not a 76ers fan by any stretch of the imagination. Just as a pure NBA fan, what I'm seeing is very alarming. Joel Embiid is very entitled to, I don't owe Philadelphia nothing, and his comments that he made about not playing in certain games, like, sure, don't play in certain games, but how entitled does that make him sound? And because he's had a bunch of injuries, LeBron James at almost 40 years old is playing in every single game that he can, if possible. One, because it matters in the regular season what you do, but also two, he understands the importance about being out there for your team. Are some games he's the focal point? No, but for the most part, LeBron James is there, available, ready to go. Joel Embiid, not so much, and almost feels like that Joel Embiid won't even finish his career after LeBron James. Like, if LeBron James wanted to play a few more seasons, it almost feels like Joel Embiid won't even make it to that point because of basically the restrictions he put on himself about how many games he will or will not play. And it's just very concerning. Joel Embiid signed this 3-year, $196 million extension on September 20th. So that's, as I'm recording this today, that's 60 days ago, 2 months ago. And he's played in 3 games, maybe. Poor effort in all 3 of them. The 76ers are 2-12 as I sit here today. And you got one of the younger up-and-coming stars for your team, Tyree Maxey, having to call you out because of your tardiness and how it's ruining the culture and a bunch of other things that kind of came up, not solely on Joel Embiid, but as him being literally the face of the 76ers to have that. And it still showed that like he couldn't be any more indifferent about needing to be ready for his team or Philadelphia. If he just signed to get his money and now it's a coast, don't bother playing. I think that's more insulting to 76ers fans and the NBA fans to do so, where, you know, the Sixers have faith in you to pay you because they believe you'll help them get to the championship. I don't even think the 76ers are going to get to the playoffs right now. Now, granted, we're 15 games into the regular season, so who knows what's going to happen, but Paul George just went out of the game tonight with an injury. Tyrese Maxey is really the only one carrying the team right now. Joel Embiid had a blah of a game, and the next game he's probably going to sit, so what does it matter? The 76ers are unfortunately going to be just, you know, the reason why maybe what's the term where what's the rest days or load management doesn't work, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't have any research base that the more you sit, the less preventative injury you have. You have Joel Embiid who puts in little to no effort. What does it matter? I mean, if you're not even going to be in a part of the season where you're playing meaningful games, truly, what does it matter? And I think it's pretty insulting to the Sixer fans from my perspective. So, and lastly, just what I want to talk about is my Lakers, of course, because I've been extremely impressed with how the Lakers have played under, you know, JJ Redick. And a couple of weeks ago, I did mention that JJ Redick has been changing the culture of the Lakers and how powerful that's been, and really getting his most out of the role players, specifically with Rui Hachimura, with Austin Reeves, and now with Dalton Knecht, who I can't believe we have a player like Dalton Knecht, who is a extremely versatile player. And I can't believe that 16 other teams allowed him to fall to the Lakers. And he shoots with confidence. He goes to the bucket with finesse and confidence. He has a really good rapport with LeBron James. And I don't want to say it, but he is a more athletic, a more well-rounded player than Austin Reeves. Like, that's what he's reminding me of. And it makes me wonder if the Lakers are actually in contention in the West, which I think they are. I think they're actually one of those top 6 teams that are going to be, you know, deep in the playoffs, especially if they can remain healthy and continue playing with as much energy as they've been playing, which I think has been extremely powerful. But if the Lakers are looking to maybe make a deadline move, I can see a D'Angelo Russell or an Austin Reeves or a Rui Hachimura or a Jackson Hayes being on the trade block to maybe get a couple of players that are a little bit more in terms of quality players to really get us over the hump to maybe get one last championship in. Because like LeBron says, he doesn't know how much longer he has. He doesn't know if it's 1 season, 2 seasons. Realistically, with how well he's playing, he can play for another 5 more years before we see any sort of diminishment of his production. But for the most part, you know, if the Lakers are serious about doing what they can to get LeBron James in the best position to win now, especially with JJ Redick as a first-year head coach, with the amount of detail that he's been putting into this team, the playing that's been happening, the action, the movement, the ball movement specifically, that's incredible. And the Lakers, I haven't seen them this creative offensively or have this much energy in a really long time. I think the last time I can recall them looking anything close to this was the 2020 season that was shut down shortly because of COVID, and then they went into the bubble, and then there was that team that won that championship. This is probably the second best team I've seen with LeBron James and AD that has been formed, that has this energy and dominance, to be frank with you, because we don't really know what we look like with the Nuggets quite yet. So we'll see. We had a really good test with Memphis. The Suns are going to be a really hard one for us with how they shoot the ball. But if we can play good defense, if our shooting can maintain that, we have an opportunity to be able to steal some of these games that before probably people didn't think that we were in. And now we're a team that people should really look at as threats to them, especially in the West, because it's super competitive. And if the Lakers, with the squad and the core that they've built, they could be in a deep playoff run. This could be the year with JJ Redick, just the attention to detail and the, precision of which he is setting just the smallest of details that is making the most difference. So I think it's huge. And I love seeing it as a Lakers fan. I can't wait to see more of it throughout the rest of the season and what it looks like in the playoffs. And I didn't get to it, but Drew did mention that he's been, very surprised at how well the Warriors have been doing. And he said he's not necessarily as surprised as what most people would be. But, you replace, Klay Thompson with a player like Buddy Hield, and the Warriors just seem to have this different style of their same offense, but just a different way. And it feels like they're shooting the ball better. So very, very interesting. Maybe on the next one, I'll have to dive in more to that one and kind of go into some of the other points that Drew had mentioned, because he did polo me about what he was seeing with the Warriors and what he was liking. So yeah, we'll do all that next time. But that's it for me, you guys. I really appreciate you guys for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to go subscribe to the podcast. You can subscribe here on YouTube. You can subscribe to it on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We are available. Find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, now on Blue Sky, on TikTok. So find us all on those. And Drew sends his love, as he said in Stingers Up. If you guys haven't caught the last few Stingers Up 10 and 11 are out right now. Stingers 12 will come out tomorrow morning. So be on the look. Actually, will come out Friday morning. Excuse me. So be on the lookout for that, where he talks about Sanger West Hornets football, their first playoff game that they went through. He did talk about that, and then he talked about his journey into now being the new freshman girls basketball coach, and also talked about their first game, or at least the varsity's first game. So that's all on Stingers Up. So that is available where you get your podcast at as well. It comes through the same feed as Drew Code. We produce it and put it out. And like I had mentioned, Drew is just knee deep in all that, and he's got some fun stuff coming up. So he would have loved to join Drew Code, but now with his new coaching gig, he now has bigger responsibilities, and we want to congratulate him and commend him for what he's doing, not only being the voice of the Hornets, but now putting his stamp as a head coach on that girls basketball program. And it's very exciting to see. I'm very, very proud of him. So Drew sends his love. If you guys want to send him your love as well, drop it in the comments down here. Let him know you're happy and proud of him. And also, again, tune in to Stingers Up when it comes out. I will catch you guys next week. I appreciate you guys for listening. Be kind to one another, and I will catch you on the next episode. So we'll see you.